I think everybody knows who's speaking this evening. We have three of our esteemed, honorable state representatives. State Representative, let's see, in alphabetical order, State Representative Cecil Bell, and he's already introduced himself. Mark Keogh, he's introduced himself, and then Will Metcalf, who is in Precinct 16. Let's see, Cecil Bell is District 3, 15 for Mark Keogh, is 16. So it's hard to keep them all straight, and there's so many different districts with every elected official, I think, has a totally different district. So anyway, we're so honored to have them. They're going to be speaking for about 10 minutes each, and then really the best way to deal with the legislators is for us to ask questions, because then that opens the door for them to speak to issues that we're especially concerned about. So they're going to be telling us their favorite bills that they helped get passed, and maybe some of the difficulties that they're welcome to tell us some of the difficulties they had, the pros and cons, maybe bad bills that they were glad that didn't pass, bad bills that did pass, back and forth. So anyway, we're going to open the door here. Should we start with, which district should we start with? We should have brought straws.
We can do a district number order.
District number order, okay. District 3, we'll start with District 3.
This is exactly like the alphabetical.
Well, I'm not sure that I need either one, but I'll go ahead and use this one. If you folks are not opposed to this, I'm going to put my hat back on. That's so in the event that you take a picture and it gets posted, my wife will know who's in the picture. Very important. So obviously, we had, I think, a very strong legislative session in a lot of ways. I want to touch on some of the elements that I always try to touch on for consistency. I serve on appropriations. So one of the things that we need to look at is where were our dollars spent according to the last legislative session. Well, we started out with $209.4 billion. That's the number that our budget is. $78 billion of that is in public education. $77 billion of that's in health and human services. The balance of it is all that's left. For all the other things that we talked about, transportation, everything else. So we've got some really critical challenges facing us with regards to how do you accomplish all of the things that are necessary to accomplish in the sense of sound governance when you've committed so much of your budget to two sectors within that budget. But we did a lot of things in that number. So from a public education side, we funded the 80,000 folks, new kids coming into the district, funded them fully. We added $1.5 billion in what you would classify as new money to public education. Those dollars being added in the formula in anticipation of having to address in the next session Judge Dietz's ruling. The Supreme Court is expected, the Texas Supreme Court is expected to come through and tell us what their opinion is of where we stand as a state as far as funding and the equity of that funding. And at that time, I think you'll see in the 85th legislative session will be, in large part, I think, dominated by the conversation of public school finance. Within the other dollars that were spent, certainly we all were concerned about border security. We spent, added in the budget over $840 million, which includes 250 more troopers and includes the dollars to pay those troopers across the state, 50 hours, which the DPS director would tell you is a force multiplier. It lets us have more boots on the ground, more time available to them without having to physically have more troopers available for that cost. At $151 million that was added in mental health. Well, sometimes we don't think about the need or the challenges that we have when we underfund mental health. But all those folks who are here in law enforcement can tell you that our jails, in many instances, are occupied by people whose total crime was mental health. You know, they're walking down the middle of the road. Well, the officer has nothing to do with them. We don't have facilities where they could drop them off for mental health care, so they ultimately wind up having to be booked. just for their own safekeeping and for the protection of the general public. So very important things that we, in the sense of, are on the side of saving money for us as Texans. We did away with the professional tax, which is $200 head tax, if you will, on professionals. That number's gone away. There's 660,000 Texans that will benefit from that number. We cut the franchise tax by 1%. That's $2.6 billion in savings across the board, stimulation to our economy, which is very important because when you look at that budget that I talked about before, that's $78 billion and that's $77 billion. The number of folks driving into those gets larger every day, and the cost associated with it gets larger. And in fact, at a greater rate than what our economy is growing. So it's very important that we answer the questions of how do we come up with those funds. We have went about trying to reduce dependency on the fund balances that are inherent to the budget. In the 83rd legislative session, we had that number cut from 10 billion down to 5. This session, we cut it down to 3. We're going to continue to do that. In doing that, we were able to take the money that's in the sporting goods sales tax and fully fund out of those dollars what was available to apply towards our public parks, our state parks, which is, I think, very sound. If we're going to take dollars from us as Texans under pretense that it's going to go to our parks, then it should go to our parks. So we took those steps. We did that on a couple of other different venues as well. There are countless things that we could talk to. I don't want to touch on everything. I want to make sure that our colleagues also, and my colleagues also have the opportunity to talk. But when we talk about bills that we passed, some of the things that are important to us, I passed a couple of bills that have statewide impact. One of them that seems to be a very innocuous bill is this bill that reduces the obligation of public schools to include on the diploma not only the standard diploma, but also their endorsements and their accomplishments while they're in high school. Well, that was an obligation that the 83rd legislative session imposed on school districts as a part of House Bill 5. The unintended consequence associated with that is that every district incurred significant additional costs and no one benefited from it. The student doesn't benefit from it. The school district certainly doesn't benefit from it. We, as Texans and as taxpayers, don't benefit. So that was a very comprehensive bill that saves tens of millions of dollars across the state of Texas and reduces the amount of bureaucracy into the system. One of the other bills that I passed that has local significance that my colleagues, when I talk about I passed, obviously it takes 76 votes to pass a bill, it takes 76 votes to kill a bill, and your Montgomery County legislators work together to make certain that we did those things that were important to Texas and to Montgomery County. But one of the bills that we passed had to do with the Emergency Service Center, Conroe Center over here. We're your 911 calls when you need a doctor, the ambulance is on the way. You don't know the people you're talking to on the phone. If they can't answer the medical issues, they forward it to the Conroe Center. Well, in a true bureaucrat's dream, the money for funding that was going to UTMB and then flowing down to that center. So we did away with that level of bureaucracy. And by having that bill available, at the end of the session, we were able to amend that bill to include telemedicine for Texans. Now that's very important. If you've ever called your doctor from somewhere else and said, "Doc, I have the same problem that I have this time every year, and I'm in some other area, I'm in some other whatever, and I just need the normal prescription." Well, they could not do that under state law. Well, telemedicine will allow them to be able to answer those kinds of questions for us. So it's important to us across the board, but it's very important to rural Texas where we're hugely underserved. I passed a bill that allows our DAs, our district attorneys, to have a reserve investigator force. Doesn't impact Montgomery County very much, but I also represent Waller County, who lost their investigator to the private sector because of the dollars that oilfield will pay for security versus what a government position pays for investigator. So this reserve status allows them to basically have the same capability as any other law enforcement agency with regard solely to that, and that is to have a reserve status. So that person can take that job in the private sector, make those extra dollars, and still be available when the DA needs them for that purpose. So again, just comprehensive stuff that makes sense. And you know, the bill that probably everyone would see as the most significant today that died in the Texas House is 4105. 4105 said that in the event the Supreme Court ruled that same-sex marriage was a right, in Texas they would not have been able to use our dollars, our taxpayer dollars, to fund that. They would not have been able to file those marriage licenses if they were issued illegally. The AG's office would have been compelled to make certain they held our state harmless from the reprehensible conduct of the Supreme Court, and we would have been, we would have been facing today lawsuits instead of challenges to what do we do with all these folks that this Supreme Court has now turned loose on our society in a reprehensible manner, and in a manner that I think, interestingly enough, if you listen to what the Chief Justice, John Jay, says, does not find any support under law or constitutionality. So this is, and that's, you know, it's not uncommon for one justice to write a scathing opinion on another justice. It's very uncommon for them to step out and say they had no authority to do what they did. That Justice Scalia described it as Kennedy's ramblings down a disappearing trail of legalistic bargle jargon. You know, how absurd is that? And what I find is I find that most Texans and most Americans, those that I interact with on a regular basis, feel like that we are just exasperated in this endeavor, because we all know what's happening, but there is no leadership with regards to what can we do, what as citizens, how can we take our country back, how can we do those things that need to be done. And to that end, I will be making an announcement next Monday that is, I think, significant to us as citizens, in the sense of making certain that we are able to restore the constitutional sovereignty of our states, the separate states and other people. There is no greater challenge facing us than making sure that this generation, future generations, those generations yet unborn, have available to them the same constitutional authorities that we were born to, the same rights, the same privileges, not those voted by 5 out of 9 who would have us live under a cratocracy or a government of judges. That's not the intent of our founding fathers. It should not be something that we find palatable or acceptable. With that said, I'm going to hand over the mic, and we'll be available, I'm sure, for questions in a little bit. And I'll turn off my alarm and say I talked for 10 minutes. So. God bless you.
Thank you, Senior Representative Bell. I appreciate that so much. And Cecil, it was raining for about 10 minutes.
I didn't say I didn't, I never
Man,
reached this far.
You just
Just
broke
that
all
I'm
the
not
ice.
spoiled that bad.
I want to tell you just a little bit about my experience in the House. This is my first session. And I have to tell you, this is the most awesome thing, the greatest privilege of my life. And I know that Will feels that way, and I know Cecil feels that way. We had the opportunity to spend a lot of time, the three of us, on the floor and talk about what we believe as a county, what we need to get done as a county, and whenever we could, although we didn't always vote for the same thing. By and large, we tried to be in unity with the other one in the county as it related to whether it was education, transportation, whatever. And I have to tell you, it was a great experience for me. I don't know if you all know this or not, and one of the things that I can share with you is that even though we were fairly well prepared, my two guys, Jason and Kurt here, who just did an awesome job after I was elected, in the primary, I had the opportunity to go the year when I didn't have anybody running against me in the fall and really work at meeting people and figuring out how this whole deal works. I got a book that they call The Rules, and so I looked at the rules and read the rules, and I thought, man, what in the world are they talking about in the rules? And so when I finally got to the House of Representatives and I watched it for up until probably the last 3 weeks, I finally figured out what the rules do. And I have to tell you, this is really this is the experience of most freshmen. I will tell you though, I had the opportunity, we were more prepared than most, but there was lots and lots to learn. And it was just a great experience. I learned in this session that relationships are everything, but they're not the end all. Relationships are important, but if your relationships cause you to sacrifice or to leave your values, it's not the right kind of relationship. By and large, in that environment, I had very few people that asked me to do something that was against my values. And in trying to get things done, one of the things Representative Bell taught me was that when you go to get things done and you want to get a bill passed and it's not working, then the best thing you can do is figure out why it is not working and go and figure out a way to make it work. Thank you, I appreciate that. Are you from District 15? One of the things I told my salespeople when I was before I was a pastor, and have been in the church all the time I was in the car business, one thing I taught them is if a customer doesn't buy a car, stop blaming the customer. Go look in the mirror and ask yourself, what is there in this skill set that I don't understand? Am I being too hard or being too soft? Am I not suggesting? What is the case? And when people would let customers leave and I would ask them about it, they would say, well, they weren't going to buy today. And then I would have the opportunity to go catch them at their car and convince them to buy today. Became an illustration of the principle that basically is this: if you can't get it done, go look in the mirror. There's always going to be the ability to blame somebody else for why you can't get something done. The best thing you can do is go figure it out. And to be sure, there are times when you just can't get it done. I was so interested in House Bill 360, and I had a lot of things done, but one that I didn't get done was House Bill 360 was the Fair Tuition Act. And the Fair Tuition Act basically said, look, if we have people who are here in our state that are here and they're here illegally, however they got here, then why are we giving them in-state tuition pricing when people from Arkansas, Louisiana, kids who have watched the University of Texas, who have watched A&M, would love to play or would love to come to that school, but they can't spend that $17,000, $18,000 a semester or $16,000. And yet we turn around and the people aren't even citizens of the United States. And so we put together a bill, an effective bill with teeth in it. And through a number of circumstances, it finally made it out, and it literally was in a committee that there's no way that was going to pass. I learned some things from that and of how to do this in the future, and I'm not going to tell you all, I'm just going to do it. Then we're going to back to because I have to tell you, there's great legislation that is left behind. Great legislation. I think for us, it's important for us to know what we believe, to present it clearly and quietly, and to make things happen the way the Lord would do it, without fanfare, without bringing notoriety to yourself. Because as soon as you do that, as soon as my Fair Tuition Act hit, and it never made it to committee, I'm going to tell you right now. So I'm not talking about a success yet. But you know, it was amazing. It was in 94 newspapers. It was on Fox News. It was all these different places. And what I didn't realize was all I'm doing is setting myself up for every group that is in favor of immigration, every group that's in favor of this form of education, to come against me. Here's Mr. Little Freshman going, what in the world just happened to me? So we learn things in our first year. And I want to thank all of you for being patient as we learn what to get involved in and what not to get involved in, and how to vote on certain things and how not to vote. As Cecil had mentioned, with some of the things he did, I had a number of things, very cool things that passed. member of the Sunset Commission when I first got there. I sat in on the Sunset Commission meeting, spent some time, and my team was in there with me, and they had over 20,000 hours, had taken a number of things that had been left over from biennium after biennium after biennium, and changed the Sunset Commission procedure in that whole thing, getting rid of agencies, adding some things, and really reducing it so that by the time it was all over in just this one document, bringing to the bottom line really about $200 million. I had a chance to get involved in it at the very beginning. And as I observed that, I said to the Sunset Commission chairman, I said, well, tell us about this bill. What is it going to do? He said, well, it's going to consolidate. It's what they call a cleanup bill. Is there any policy in it? Nope, there's no policy. Well, how many pages is it? It's a short bill. It's 2,247 pages. I want you to imagine 4 reams of paper. And I said to him, are we supposed to read that? He said, well, you know, that is the idea. And he was smiling at me when he said it. There was a crowd of us in this session. And then he said, but you know what, if you don't read it, then it's just going to be a trust me bill.
Oh.
And so we would have had read it when he said that. And we put, there's 3 teams that got together on that. We put it together, we read that entire thing, and I had a chance, a wonderful opportunity to co-author that bill. As a result of all that, it was awesome. We worked in, Cecil did not mention anything about it. I'd really like to say just a couple things about the gun legislation that was taking place. And, you know, that was a workout. I watched it go from the House over to the Senate, and open carry, and then come back with various things on it, and amendments that we would have all liked. You know, I know that there are many people here for constitutional carry. I think that what I also learned in this is that many things are done incrementally. They're done incrementally. We passed an open carry. Now we have an opportunity. Everybody's gotten used to it, and that's a good thing. The other side of that is the bad guys do that too. And as they pass these incremental deals, as we pass a bill to do a study is code word for we're going to do a study, but guess what? We've already figured out what the end result of our study is, and we've already got you to buy into what that study is. And so we're going to do this, and then we're going to present a bill next round that has to do with this study. You know, these are the kind of things that happen incrementally. But in the gun legislation, we do it at this point. We look at open carry again and constitutional carry in the future. I rewrote a bill, House Bill 805, that I talked that it had to do with carry anywhere bill, which is really not a carry anywhere bill, but that's what they call it. And it gives you the opportunity, if anywhere you were in a taxpayer-funded area, that you have the right to carry a handgun. And in our sense, it was still concealed, but you had a right to do it. And there are some caveats to that as well. You don't have time to go into it. Pardon me? And then we have campus carry that it did pass. And there were things about campus carry that kind of went back and forth. But here is a start. And we know that there are going to be gun-free zones in campus carry. We already know you have to be 21. You have to have a concealed handgun license. There is some testing involved in it. There is background checking involved in it. And most kids in college now are not 21 to begin with. But I will tell you this, as some of you wonder, why in the world would the legislature do this? One of the things that we all understand is what DPS believes. If you will go to the Department of Public Safety website, if you go there today and you look on their website, you will see concealed handgun license. And you go to that section, right there. If you go to that section, you will see that the Department of Public Safety believes that people who have handgun license are the most law-abiding citizens because they have all the statistics over I don't know how many years that show it. You know how many aggravated homicides in the last 10 years? CHL holder? What would you think?
0.03%.
Family violence. There was 18 of them last year. You go on. Oh man, family violence in the CHL, yeah, 18 people. You know how many without it? Without a CHL and family violence? 27,000. So they operate under the assumption when you get stopped, you have a CHL, you always show that to them, that here's a person who wants to abide by the law, believes in our values. When it comes to campus carry, that's what we believe about that. It was I have to tell you, Dale, I know my time's up. It was for me, it was a great learning experience. I cannot tell you how much I appreciated your calls, your letters, your times of thankfulness. I took it in the chin on a few things, and I've got big shoulders. And I promise you, I'll be able to be some reasons why you're proud of it. God bless you all. And God bless the great state of Texas.
Thank you very much. Again, my name is Will Metcalf. It's just such an honor serving in the legislature. Just thank you for this opportunity to come before you tonight. I tell you, working with my two colleagues here in Montgomery County is such an honor and privilege, and look forward to many more good times. I will tell you this, Montgomery County carried a big stick in Austin. They knew exactly who we were, what we wanted to accomplish, and I felt like the three of us accomplished what we needed to get accomplished. And of course, there's more legislation that needs to be done. One thing about this process is over 6,000 bills were filed this session, bills and resolutions. So 1,300 of them passed. So that goes to show you that there's a lot of good ideas out there and a lot of bad ideas. So the process is made to kill bills, just like Cecil's bill. Great bill that I supported. I know Mark did as well. Wanted to see that get through, especially in light of the recent Supreme Court rulings. So we can work on that next time as well. I want to talk a little bit about transportation. Senate Joint Resolution number 5 by Senator Robert Nichols. This is a great piece of legislation that will be on our November ballot this year. And I hope that we all get out there and support it. What this will do, TxDOT will receive $2.5 million a year in state sales tax revenue beginning in 2017. This is provided that the overall sales tax exceed $28 billion. This will continue now for 15 years. In 2019, TxDOT will receive 35% of vehicle sales tax revenue above the $5 billion mark. And one good thing about this piece of legislation that I really like is that this funding cannot be used for toll road projects. It's specifically for new roads and also maintenance on existing roads. So this will be great for our infrastructure. I'm very proud to be co-sponsor of that, seeing that pass. And like I said, it'll be on our November ballot. Tax relief was a major goal. We kind of touched on that a little bit. Senate Bill 1 and raised the homestead exemption from $15,000 to $25,000. So I'm very pleased with that. That puts more money in your pocket that we can all come here tonight to Incredible Pizza. And that too will be on this November's ballot as well. And yeah, constitutional. House Bill 32, I was a co-author of, and I believe our two colleagues were as well, but this reduces the franchise tax by 25% across the board. I'm not a fan of the franchise tax, wanted to go away completely, but this is a good step forward in this past legislative session. Border security, we spoke a little bit about that. House Bill 11, the Stronger Border Safer Texas Act. I know that Cecil talked about 250 additional state troopers along our border. And this is very good across the whole state of Texas because right now, the state of Texas, we're having to pull troopers from our communities all across state of Texas for them to serve on the border, to protect our borders. And so that presents an issue whenever Officer Smith here in Conroe has to go down the border. That leaves our home communities just a little less safe. So House Bill 11 is a great step forward. And the whole budget, over $840 million is for border security. We talked about 910, the open carry legislation. That came through my committee. I served on the House Homeland Security and Public Safety Committee. It was really neat to see that process work, and that was a long day of testimony that day. Some pro-life legislation that was passed in the House was House Bill 3994. This seeks to improve the protections of minors by addressing reforms in our judicial bypass system. So this is, if a minor goes to seek an abortion and is in court, the judge can ask more questions to see what's really going on in that child's life. House Bill 3374 increases information and resources available to relating Down syndrome cases. 3074, this kind of reminded me of the Terry Schiavo case in Florida a few years years back. This ensures that vulnerable patients are not denied the basic human care for food, water, and pain management. So I'm very excited about that bill. A couple bills that I'd like to talk about that I got done along with the help of my colleagues was I consider the honeybee bill. So what this is, your friends or your neighbors may have a couple honeybee hives in their backyards. Well, if they are wanting to bottle that honey and sell it at a flea market on the side of the road, give it to a neighbor, right now they currently have to go to the state to get licensing for this. So what we did, we exempted it if they produce 2,500 pounds or less. So less regulation. That's a home run. Another one that's very important to Montgomery County, it's a local bill, is the tow rotation bill. Worked on this, and what this is, right now the city corner operates like this, but the county does not, and they could not without this legislation. Well, what this does, if you see a car accident on the side of the road in an unincorporated area of Montgomery County, you'll drive up to it and you'll see 10 to 15 tow trucks on the side of the road. Traffic jam starts happening. Well, right now, and this is effective immediately, and the sheriff is about to implement it. I had a good discussion with Sheriff Tommy Gage the other day. But what this will do is now the sheriff's department can maintain a tow rotation list. So if that fender bender happens, you will no longer see 15 to 20 tow trucks on the side of the road, because now they're going to be taking turns and doing a tow rotation list. So very happy that that passed. Another bill is what I consider the guardianship bill. Worked very, very closely with local County Court Law Judge Claudia Laird on this legislation. She came to me late last summer and presented that there were some issues going on that she dealt with. And what this does is, if a ward of a state, so a ward of a state is saying you've already been declared incompetent by the state, so you have a legal guardian who looks after you, makes your decisions. Well, if that ward gets in trouble, gets into our justice system, right now they have to fill out their own paperwork in the jail. They have to say who their visitors are, their doctors are, their legal representation. Well, sometimes they're mentally incapable of doing that, and other times they may be mad at their legal guardian. So this protects the legal guardians of wards of our states. They will now be automatically put on there. They can fill out the necessary paperwork. That goes for the children who are declared incompetent, the mentally ill, the elderly. So this protects our legal guardians in our state. So very excited about that. Judge Laird had a ceremony about it yesterday, as a matter of fact, and received a lot of great compliments about that. So at this time, the three of us will take questions, if that's okay. I did not.
Okay. So on our November ballot, we'll have some other constitutional amendments to consider. We will also be considering whether to grant capital residency as a requirement, the way it's currently written in the Constitution. Put that back on. We will, which means that right now they have to live, it says at the capital. We didn't see them up there, so I'm thinking they live in Travis County, but which is actually the case. That's the way it's capital with an A, not with an O. We'll also be looking at the opportunity for professional teams to have raffles, charitable raffles. That'll be on our ballot for us to decide as Texans. We'll be looking at whether or not we will grant the surviving spouses of disabled vets the same exemptions on homesteads that we currently provide to the veterans. We'll be looking, and this is an interesting bill to me because in Texas, I assume, my family hasn't been here for 6 generations so far, that hunting and fishing is just a given in Texas. But in other states, we've seen those rights eroded. So there will be a proposition there for us to vote on whether or not we want to make it a constitutional right, a Texas constitutional right to hunt and fish. And I think that's very important. The last item that'll be on here allows for, this sounds kind of odd, but when you consider where it's at, it makes sense. Counties with a population of less than 7,500 people are wanting to be able to spend taxpayer dollars to keep private roads up. Now, why would we want to consider that? Because in those counties, we're talking about far west Texas, where it's ranch roads that are used to get kids to school. It's ranch roads that are used to take ambulances to pick people up. It's all those big, long, private roads. So that'll be in front of us, though, to decide whether we want to help those neighbors to be able to do that. It has no effect on us in any of our districts, but it does have an effect on Texas. So anyway, those will also be items that we will see on our November ballot as constitutional amendments or potential constitutional.
Who has the first question? I believe you had your hand up first, so we'll let you start.
Okay, this was directed to Representative Fields regarding HB 360, the Fair Tuition Act. That went to the wrong committee, as you said. Are you going to be bringing that up again?
Yeah, okay, good. House Bill 360, which is the Fair Tuition Act. I'm not going to be bringing that up again. You know, that's part of the DREAM Act that was passed by our Governor Abbott's predecessor. And if I told you what I was going to do, it's top secret, then you know what I have to do. However, what I have found, just doing reading on what is taking place since the session, this is top of mind awareness for people. And because it is really an issue that is, to allow such a thing to take place and continue to do it violates all of our sense of fairness, our sense of our conscience about what is right and wrong. It violates our sense of Texas and what I believe is Texas exceptionalism and virtue. And I think that it is worthy to continue to hammer away upon this, even if you have to do it incrementally, because what is taking place is we are losing. Remember, these kids that go to law school in Texas, that go whatever, they're going to end up in the legislature. And they're going to be voted in that legislature, and all the freedoms we've come to know and love are going to be gone. We have to take action soon. So, chances are, yes.
Are we all answering the question?
If you care to, if not, we'll pass it back and I'll get another question. Either of you have additional comments?
Question on 360 and whether you're going to bring it up or not.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Next question. Teresa, could you just?
Yeah. Thank you all for your service, by the way. In our family, our tax, I know you gave us a little bit of property tax relief. I want to know specifically what else might be on the horizon maybe the next legislative session, because our tax went $30,000 2 years ago, $30,000 last year, and then we opened our bill this time. It went up $100,000 in our neighborhood. My brother, who lives in April Sound, his went up 66% his property taxes. So $100,000 hit. So we're talking about selling our house because we can't afford to pay the property taxes.
Start.
Yeah, no, that's a high priority of
Could you
mine.
briefly restate?
Yeah, she's asking about property taxes, basically appraisal reform.
Yeah.
I guess. So this is something that I remember this day. We were on the House floor, and I went up to Representative Keogh first, and I said, "Look, during the interim, we've got to work on appraisal reform." And I'll let you talk about that. So, anyways, then went to Cecil, and we talked about the same thing. So this is something that the three of us are going to be working on this. I've already directed my staff to start working on this, and we're going to have a meeting very soon after we get all our facts together. But I'll tell you, it's something that very concerns me. I know of a piece of property that went up 98%. And this is my hometown, this is my home county, and I don't want to be taxed out of my county. And this is something that I'm not going to be taken lightly. This is very serious, and we have to address it, because what's happening now will not continue to work.
Absolutely. I think everybody here probably has an absolute commentary on this, but to tell you that it is significant to me is one thing. To tell you that it affects me directly, both as a resident of Montgomery County and as a business owner who has commercial holdings in Montgomery County, there's a certainty that it affects us all in this room tangibly. To that end, I carried a bill in the 84th legislative session that would have capped appraisal increases, tax increases at 5% for all real property, not just for commercial property, not just for residential property, but for all real property. I carried that bill in the 83rd legislature also, but was unable to get it even into committee for a hearing in the 84th, I got it to committee for a hearing, and we were in a position to get it out of committee. But it was not a bill that the calendars wanted to move. So therefore, it is something that you can rest assured will be back up and forward. We will be pushing it again in the next legislative session. It doesn't prevent those fast growth areas from being able to fund fast growth. It just requires them to be truthful and saying what the tax rates will be to fund that.
Picking up where Cecil left off, when we couldn't get that bill out, of which we joint authored with Cecil, I presented it as an amendment, and it was coming to find out it was not germane. And so they busted me on that, and so I took it down without constitutional legislation, come that needed enabling legislation, but not without having the opportunity to speak to the floor on the issues having to do with property tax and appraisal reform. The issue is not the tax rate. The issue, you can adjust the figures any way you want. And, either in car language, you either put it into trade or you discount the car or all that stuff that you've come to know and love over the years. But the fact of the matter is that it's either, if we need major appraisal reform. We already have a 10% constitutional cap, and we passed that on, what Cecil had done the last couple of years, and wrote a bill, put it through, and again, we got knocked down on that. But please understand, we are on, and this is another one that we're going to be working on.
Next question. Chair.
I'm going to go a little bit off the subject. You may or may not agree, but everything I've read, Strauss is a problem. They're not going to get what really needs to be done to get rid of Strauss. So I want to know where you stand and what you're going to do.
Well, I think it's kind of an interesting conversation when you look at what happens in a position that is elected by the body. So you have 150 folks who will elect the speaker. And in the 84th legislative session, we have 98 Republicans there. But we all know that there is not support across the board for an alternative candidate. In fact, my desk mate, Scott Turner, was that person who ran. And my questions to Scott were two. He's my brother in Christ, he's my good friend, he's my desk mate. But he was not able to answer these two questions. My first question was, what is your plan to win? My second question was, what are you doing to make sure we know the right people to put in all of these committees? Because when you talk about subjects like the appraisals, those are finite, they're in our area. When you talk about the appropriations committee, how many people in this room can see $1 billion in your mind? How many people can see $209 billion? Well, within the legislature, you probably have 5 or 6 people who can see that. I'll answer it off the floor.
Yeah, I met with Representative Scott Turner about this time last year, I believe it was. We met at the Lone Star Executive Airport. He flew down on a private jet. We had a glass of tea together, and I asked him the same question. We had a good visit. I liked Scott Turner a whole lot. Really great guy. Good visits on the House floor together, and good visits off. And I wish him the best of luck. I know he's not running for re-election, and I don't know who's running right now. I don't promise support until I know who's in the race. And I heard today, some other news, so who knows what's going to happen. So that's where I am at this time.
Thank you. Well, I had, at the very beginning, when I had the opportunity to determine how I was going to vote, certainly I met with Scott, got to know Scott. You know what? The Bible says man listens to one side of the story as a fool. So I went to see the speaker myself, and I talked to him, and I have to be honest with you, he didn't really want to talk about it. I even brought it up, how's it going, and he didn't take any time to talk about it at all. All he said to me was, well, things are going like they typically go, and that was the end of the conversation. So when I went there, I, based upon what my constituents were telling me, my supporters, I voted against the speaker. I voted against the speaker, and because I represent House District 15, and I get hundreds of emails. So for whatever that's worth, when you contact us and you tell us what's going on, does that not work?
No.
It should. Here's the point. though. Let me, if I can just, if you will, can I have another?
Yes, this matter will extend to each of you an additional matter.
I think that whoever runs, I think it behooves us as legislators to make sure that we vet them. That we don't operate off a scorecard. And that you guys have elected us with a conscience and a sense of reason. And what is virtuous, and what is right, and what is wrong, and what are the histories. You know, when I was at the Lexus store, we determined whether or not we were going to hire somebody based upon past performance. I mean, that was it. And as we looked at past performance, it's easy to see. We know what we have right now. But in the next process, to me, I want to vote for the most conservative individual that's going to represent my values, certainly, the values of the state of Texas, but you know, and equally as important as all of that is the values of my constituents. And if they don't represent the values of my constituents, then I'm not going to vote for that individual. It's that easy for me. So I hope that's helpful to you all on our perspective.
Yeah, something I want to point out, because obviously when we talk about contacts, I would encourage each and every one of you to be engaged, involved in contacting. But I would ask you this question. Who here thinks that simply having the biggest numbers should be the basis in talking about contacts to our offices? By the way, one email from you is one contact. 40 emails is one contact. Just so you know how that premise works. Who thinks that it's solely based on the largest number of email received? Everybody feel like that's the case? All right, who believes that we should have homosexual marriage be the law of our land? Anybody in the room believe that? Well, when 4105, when I was carrying 4105, the numbers of emails that I received over 1,500 emails in opposition to our value system. I received less than 400 emails standing for it. So should we always react solely to the numbers? Because if so, I should have pulled out 4105. Or should we also consider all the variables that are inherent to the job that you've elected us to do?
Back to the gentleman back here.
I'd like to revisit property taxes. Appreciate y'all taking some incremental steps, but how can we say that we live as free men if we allow the government to charge us rent on the property that we own? There's got to be a way that we can tell the government we own our property. We're not renting it from you. And how do we change the tax structure to get that done? I'm all for it. I'm paying attention.
They all like to fuck me. You know, to me, it's a, I don't know about y'all. I like roads. I like roads that work. I like infrastructure. I like water. I like to make sure that I have water coming from wherever it is to my area. And part of that whole issue has to do with our property taxes. The Bible even doesn't speak against no tax. The Bible clearly says, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar, taxes to whom taxes due. And so there is a place for tax. There is also a place for over-government, too large of government that creates tax in order to create the size of government, on which we are against. We are for a smaller government with less regulation. But we have to have some way of cumulatively bringing together our resources so that we can enhance our quality of life in a particular area, which doesn't necessarily mean boats on a lake, but it does mean water, and it does mean police, and it does mean protection from evil forces. And part of that has to do with that. I feel your pain. Please don't misunderstand. I hear what you're saying. And but taxes are part of what we do. Our job, as you have hired us, is to, and Will's going to finish the sentence.
Martin, I have a problem with that.
You didn't respond to my question with all due respect. You talked about making taxes lower and we'll have to pay them. I get that. We gotta find another way to do it, whether it's sales tax.
That's not what you said, though.
It
You
is what I said. I said,
eliminate
where's
tax.
another mechanism
If
that
I,
we can?
with all due respect, if I may, if you'll just give me just patience. What I heard, and correct me if I was wrong, because if I was wrong, I'm all over it and I'll change it. But what I heard was that this is God's earth that He's given to us, and why should we be taxed? Who else heard that?
No.
No.
What did y'all hear?
He didn't say that.
What I said was, how can we pretend to live as free men if we allow the government to charge us rent every month or every year on the property that we own? So how else can we come up with taxes, a structure where you don't get taxed off of your property and fund the necessary things that need to be funded? So that was my question, not about how to live without any of those taxes. I understand we gotta have the money, we gotta find another place.
I'm with you. I appreciate that. See,
So, yeah, so already I'm working on this answer to this question, and I have been since 2004 when I wrote a plan to do away with ad valorem taxes in Texas. I had a senator who was gonna sponsor, but then we bought down the tax rate. But, so what I'm looking at right now is a limited, and again, preface that any conversation I'm about to tell you, I would not support unless it came with constitutionally restricting the ability to ever reimpose the tax this concept would replace. But what you can do, at least consider doing what I'm looking at right now, running the numbers on it, is to use a transactional tax that is a much shorter window of tax, so that if you live on your place, there's a point in time when you're done paying taxes. Therefore, we funded governments. Because we in Texas, in the 2007 was the lowest transactional year, we had $39 billion worth of residential property transacted. The average is somewhere between 50 and 55 billion. So somewhere in that is where we'll find the answers.
Yeah, this is something that I hope I alluded to earlier whenever I was speaking to this lady in front, but this is something that my staff and myself are working on. 3 of us are going to be working on during this interim, but I'm kind of in the same situation that Cecil's in, that kind of taking that approach as well. I don't have the details of that for you right now, but this is the same thing that we're all talking about.
I'll help you all I can.
If I can, be a part of the issue with that was when we presented, no joke, when we presented the decrease in property tax or a cap at 5%, there were numerous groups who benefit from that contacted us and said, no. You have portions of business communities, school districts. We're going to get the money if we cut the property tax. So that's all part of the scenario. We understand that. And so one positive side of this whole deal is we don't have income tax here, state income tax, which if you were to take a look at it and how one would offset the other, you have to do the math on that, what that is. Jason and Kurt and I started doing that, and we don't want income tax either, so it's difficult. Thank you for your questions.
Let's get way in the far back. Right.
Thank you. This is a bit personal for me, so I'm going to try to drop a bombshell. In the 60s, we were recognized worldwide as the most educated high school people in the world. Late 80s, we were starting to be laughed at. No, we weren't laughed at. Right now, we're one of the most expensive, and Montgomery County, Texas, one of the worst school systems in the entire world. We're what, 26th in math? Something like that. We've got these strings to the federal government that's trying to draw us down a rat hole further. How do we free up parents to allow their children to get an education rather than an indoctrination? And we're not even fighting at the edges of this in the legislation. There were 2 bills I'm aware of for vouchers. One I really like, I called that for. But we need to get out of this bureaucratic, federally run local school system and allow for educating that. That means cutting the strings to the federal government and to local government. Is anybody working on this? This is our great threat today and to our future. Talk to college graduates. You know, they would, in 1919, not pass the 6th grade general exam.
Okay, we appreciate the question. Who would like to start? Will?
Thank you for the question. One of the reasons why I ran for this office to begin with is because of my 2 daughters. I have twin daughters that'll be 4 very soon. And I ran because of their future, and education was very important to me for their future. And I'm a big local control guy. I think the No Child Left Behind Act by the federal government was one of the worst things that could happen. There's too many mandates that it puts on our state level, and that's why we see terrible things such as Common Core come up. And
Do you vote to support Common Core?
no, I do not support Common Core.
313, yeah.
I'm sorry?
313, no, 313. You didn't? Okay.
No, I did not. No. I'm not for Common Core. All 3 of us up here did not vote for that bill that you're referring
So
to.
if we can cut the strings and, for example, we're gonna have bond issues on Conroe and Lewis coming up in November. How much of that money is going to improve education? None.
And thank you for the question. We have 1 minute per question. Somebody else want to comment on that?
Well, sure. Anytime we talk education, I think it's important to recognize that a part of the way that we as parents take back our school systems, and some of our schools do very well, by the way. I have 2 sons that graduated from Magnolia High School, and I'll put them up against anybody anywhere in the world, education-wise. That doesn't mean everyone's children always get the same from every class. But I'll stack my kids against anybody. With that said, House Bill 842, which I passed during the 83rd legislature, is certainly the type of legislation necessary for us to take back our schools. It lets us as parents be able to put our kids through our community colleges, the interface with our community colleges and 4-year universities, into whatever level of curriculum that we want to put them in. It lets them have access to a full spectrum of different careers options that give them ownership of their education on a much deeper level than what we find. Have your minute? So on the legislature, that's how it works in the legislature. So,
All in favor, aye.
So,
Ayes have it.
but at the end of the day, what we've got to be able to do, and the cost for that process is about $5,000 a student. And the students, the teachers, and the parents get to then decide what level of curriculum you want your kids to be in. And your kids still get to have access to all of the other types of things that most folks want to have them in, whether that's academics, whether that's the drama program, whatever it is, they still get to have access to that. So what we have to understand is that there are great challenges with the federal government having any involvement in any aspect of our lives. Make no doubt, or make no doubt, or take no doubt that any of us would take exception to that statement, because we are actually in our office looking at what the cost is associated with taking federal money in our public school system. Because at the end of the day, it is my belief that it costs us more to take money than what we value for it. And I'm in favor of not having the strings attached.
Thank you. Do you have a final comment?
Yes. House Bill 313, Senate Bill 313, it came back over. Jonathan Symes and his group approached me right before we went into a session, asked me if I would present a paper on why this was a bad bill and pass it around to all legislators. Now, in order to get that done, I can tell you it was like unbelievable. Give all the credit to the Lord. I got it done, was able to sign off on it, passed out 150 of these. And then when the bill came up, I went to Jimmy Don Aycock, Chair of Education, and we were arguing over 2 amendments that I had proposed. One of those amendments had to do with taking 100% of what they get for curriculum and turning it to 25% for IT and that sort of thing, and the other 75%. The other one had to do with all of the work that had been done in the previous sessions in education on social studies, that sort of thing. And in the bill, all the work that had been done, with new textbook coming this fall, was basically going to be history if we allowed it. I was able to stand, I was able to argue on the floor. Jimmy Don, we gave him one amendment, he gave me the other, we argued about it, and we took a very short bunch of votes and turned it into a quantity. Next session, fortunately, the governor vetoed it, but it's gonna come back again. Well, now we know where they're headed, and we can stop them. But I had a chance to be at the school reading text last summer with Barbara Cargill, which is what really gave me the opportunity to be able to do that, so that was awesome.
Our country is a country of laws. This last session, we once again had the chance to pass American laws for American courts. What's it gonna take to get this passed? It's important. We cannot have Sharia law in Texas. It's already being recognized in some courts. What's it gonna take to get it passed?
Yeah, no, and I signed on 2 pieces of legislation that dealt with American laws for American courts. And I want to see that it did not pass this session. I want to see it done next session. But this is something very important to me. We need to operate under American laws and not have a foreign country dictate how we operate our courts here. And it's my plan to make sure that we progress that along next session, American laws for American courts. We had two good pieces of legislation this session that, did not pass that I would like to see pass along with Cecil's bill, and there's others like that out there that we've got to get passed.
So I think when you look at the biggest challenge that we faced on this bill is the perception by some folks that that it's already the law of the land, that you can only use American law in American courts. But I would submit to you that it is as important to make certain that that is the only law that we hear in our courts as it was and is to make certain that we, as the separate states and the people of the separate states, hold the power to define our societies, the sovereign right to define them, whether that's marriage, whether that's whatever those issues are. But it's going to take a change. We all put a tremendous amount of effort in it. It's going to take a change of the mindset of a larger body, because within that larger body you don't find a concern, and that is the big issue with getting it in. And so while we'll continue to work diligently, and while I think each time you file a bill you get more and more likely that it passes, that's the challenge.
Thank you, Cecil. I would echo what Cecil has to say. We all worked very hard on that bill, and the difficulties, there is that perception, it's already there. When I did my House Bill 360, they were going to pass a resolution, and just a joint, they wanted a joint resolution, just to reaffirm the DREAM Act. The DREAM Act was already in place. I was challenging it in the bill that I did, and just to reaffirm it, and it's like a statement that's across the bow. This is what we believe, and this is what we hold to. And I can tell you unequivocally, I know I speak for myself, and I believe I speak for these two guys as well, as I've observed them, as I've watched their votes and how they operate. We all believe that the only laws that are supposed to be in American courts are American laws. Period, case closed, end of story. It is amazing to me that we have come to this place where we're entertaining the possibility of other laws. It is amazing. And with this recent act and the issue with religious freedom, we had a chance to do the Pastor's Protection Act, which I am keenly interested in. And the fact of the matter is, now it's probably going to be trumped as a result of what is taking place in this. So this is top of mind awareness.
Let's go back to this side. You.
Okay.
Get to the judge
Education,
and win.
which I am up on, believe me, I'm up on the education issue. And our education system is so corrupt here in the States, and I'm not talking about teachers. And we're funding our own demise. They're paying into TASA and TASB. TASA and TASB are not interested in conservative, great things. Everything that we fight, they're for. And so y'all have these people coming in from TASA and TASB that have the money to come in and lobby y'all to get these bills passed, like 313 and 5 and whatever else they want to. And we're back home going, no, don't vote for that stuff. And I'm glad ACOG's leaving. He'll probably run for the Senate. But anything ACOG or Selder want, you better go, I mean, they are just on the progressive path of education. And it's just so corrupt now, and I don't know how to pull back, and let's quit funding our own demise. I don't know why superintendents are paying their membership fees to TASA with our money.
Okay, thank you. Before we get a reply, who would like to start?
Yeah, I can continue to talk. but I
So-
won't be,
So why are they funding? Obviously, as you know from having been on the campaign trail for schools, TASB, TASA, all of those different entities provide what is a service to those schools. Now, whether or not we agree with the services provided, that's why they fund them. Is because a lot of school districts are too small to have their own IT department, to have their own human resources and things of that nature. So I think the greater question is, how do we make sure that what's being done there is consistent with our value system and is not inconsistent and is not a push to move us away from where we are supposed to be. I think the whole premise that they should be providing a curriculum is a challenge, and I think most school districts now have recognized that. And so, again, do we want each school to fund that independently? That's the question. That's why it came into existence. Like all things, it started with some good purpose. Question remains, what are we allowed to do and be?
I deferred over to my colleague to my left because he used to be on the school board. So,
I know,
yeah,
I know.
that's an issue that I'm not wholeheartedly familiar with, so it's hard for me to answer. But I trust you, and I trust Representative Bell. And like he said, we got to make sure our core values are in our school system. And, I want to make sure that Common Core is not. And
It's Core, quote unquote, is and not. I mean, it's a smokescreen. I mean, no, we're not doing the part testing and all that, but the Common Core math here starting in 3rd grade, there's been lots of complaints about that this year. And so.
But we got to stop that. And we've got to do whatever we can to stop that, and we will work together, I promise you, because we all three have the same moral and values. And you would love to see the three of us work together on the floor, and the communication that our offices have with each other. Cecil was right across the hall from me, Mark was a couple hallways over, but we work so well together, and we understand what the issues are, and we want to hear from you. Thank you. And we just got to make sure that we keep this up between us, and appreciate you reaching out.
These things that we're dealing with today did not start today.
No.
They've been going on for the last 30, 40, 50 years in the development of this. And so here's what we have. We have a couple of freshmen. We have a double guy here at 6, and they go on to some very exciting things, I believe. And so it's a process that takes time, because it takes tremendous force of will. It takes tremendous political force of will and moral force of will to stand in the face of 149 people and you be the only one on the board. I've been there. That was fun. People looking across at me, Keto, what'd you do? Did you miss that? Thank God I look over there, Cecil and Will over there too. The time just the 3 of us were on the board. It was remarkable, but it takes tremendous force of will, and there's tremendous pressure as you're just trying to get through the learning curve. And I promise you, what you guys elected, who you elected, the moral values that we hold, I believe are the values of Montgomery County. But it takes time to build this group and this force and to develop an influence in the House to be able to change these things. And it doesn't go by bouncing in and out, and this person and that person. It takes a tremendous amount of time. And we're in for the long haul. So we're your guys.
I would want there is, so
Just a brief additional
No, I
comment.
did have
Give it real brief.
A real brief additional comment. And a question to my colleagues. Were you approached by TASB and TASA and asked to vote for 313?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You were? Well, I wasn't. And so it,
I was approached by both of them.
okay, because you were actually writing
I wrote an amendment.
an amendment to it. And so sometimes the perception that these groups are out there working actively with each legislator are not as large as might be considered. That was the only thing I wanted to say.
I mean, Thompson and Tasby, they're not only
We-
providing services,
We need to move on to the next person so everybody gets a chance.
they're pushing legislation.
We
They're not
appreciate that.
providing services.
Judge Mack, you got a question?
Well, yes, and great segue to what our Representative Keo said. I want to thank all three of you because you single-handedly stood in the face of adversity against Senate Bill 106 and then House Bill 2398. And you, as a group, you stood, and I want to thank you for taking a stand against that. And as a result, a 180-page terrible bill got reduced down to 70 pages. And our children are protected. And y'all stood in the face of adversity. We took on the strongest senator, the dean of the Senate, and he was defeated. And because of your moral stand, I thank you for that, and I appreciate it in what all you did in helping us. And from the House floor, they were calling me and saying, it's going to pass, but I want you to know we voted against it. Thank you for that.
Context of those bills were, just briefly.
Yeah, I'll be happy to. Judge Mack, thank you for your communication during that time period. I know that we went back and forth a lot because one day it was a bad bill, the next day it got fixed, then another day it became bad again. So that's just how it is. And just want to thank you for all your work and watching it, because this affected the justice of the peace throughout the state of Texas, is what it did in regards to our children and tardiness in school and ticketing. And this is something that the Justice of the Peace Association, our local Justice of the Peace, were not in favor of. Like I said, they were against it for it and against it again because of what happens through the process. But that's kind of what the bill was. And just really appreciate your leadership. And like you mentioned, we would call him on the House floor. I remember there was one time whenever there was I can't remember this school topic. I don't even remember what it was.
E-smoking bill.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Yes,
E-smoking.
on school campuses. Well, anyway, so we all got together on the House floor and let's call our superintendents, see what they think and their ideas. So you called Superintendent Magnolia, and I had Don Stockton's cell phone number, so I called him. We all three talked to him on the phone. So it's great working with people like yourself throughout our community.
That's good. Thank you.
Question? By Joe?
For many long years now, they've been in the process of in a war with the Marxists, with cultural Marxism progressing through our country, and they're using the public education for the transmission belt. LGBT are proponents of this cultural Marxism. They want to destroy our churches, our religion, the morals of our children. You look at the books that they have approved for sex education, they are smut. These things can be done in good taste. They don't have to look like something that's under the bridges by the Santa River or on the bathroom stalls in drive-in theaters. Right. What can you do to protect the children from this smut?
The Marxist socialist plan, progressivism. How many of you ever read the Communist Manifesto?
Yeah.
You ought to just get it and listen to it online, pull up your iTunes, leave a box, and you can listen to it when you're traveling somewhere. Did you know that graduated income tax is one of the 10 tenets of the Communist Manifesto? Did you know that public school system, public education, is one of the tenets? Did you know that a controlled press, a media, is one of the tenets? And there are many other things. So this has been going on for a long time. And in my judgment, first of all, there is education that should be taught that is Christian. Call it Christian education, but there's education that is Christian. And I do not believe that there is a distinction or a separation between public education and what can be taught. We have been indoctrinated. Many people in this room believe in separation of church and state. And what you're wanting us to do is to keep our values, which as Christians, if you're here, then your values aren't going to mean that you're going to believe, at least in a opportunity to talk about supernatural creationism, to talk about the things that we believe are right and true, pro-life, whatever. But the fact of the matter is that what that takes is tremendous moral force on the part of 76 legislators who will all vote in favor of it, who are able to get it through a committee and onto the floor for a vote. And I gotta tell you, it's not an easy thing to do, but it can be done, but it takes moral will on the part of legislators.
You also have to continue to have elected SOB members and not have them appointed, because that can also be a danger. But this sex education in the hands of Planned Parenthood and the homosexual group movement is very, very dangerous to our
Joe,
generation.
let them answer. Appreciate the question, but I want to get everybody to ask a question.
So I'll follow up on Mark, and you kind of took the words right out of my mouth, because I was going to mention the SBOE. And, you know, Barbara Cargill, a former chairwoman of the SBOE, does an outstanding job.
Yeah.
And we need to elect people like her that represent our values. And, you know, they're the ones that can see what's going in our textbooks. I know Mark worked on some textbook reading before session started, so we need to continue to elect people like herself.
So I think there are always a couple of conversations that tie to this. You brought up separation of church and state, but who can tell me whether the separation of church and state is in our Declaration of Independence or in our Constitution?
Lie.
It's from a secular letter written by Thomas Jefferson to the Danbury Baptist Church, intended to say that the state no longer had the ability to prevent the Baptist Church, remembering that they came from being under a monarchy, under British rule, which dictated what your religion was. So that was very much an abused concept. Came in 1962 when Justice Hugo Black abused the public school system in New York by doing away with prayer in schools. The LGBT community is a huge threat, and as I said over and over on the floor to all my colleagues when we were carrying 4105, when I was carrying 4105, this conversation is not about same-sex marriage. It is about taking our kids. It's about taking our society. It's about changing who we are as Americans, and we cannot allow that to happen. We must stand up. And so I'm out of time, but I will tell you that our convictions, the folks who are up here, our convictions to standing for that are strong, solid, consistent with where we are as Montgomery County citizens.
Good. A&M shirt.
All right. Over the last week, we've seen some interesting events out of Washington, D.C. with the Supreme Court rulings. Basically, the feel I got is they're telling y'all that what y'all do is irrelevant. It's all going to be decided by 5 of the 9 in Washington. What can we do as a state? What can y'all do as members of the state legislature to, well, I hate quoting a Democrat president, but when, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Kennedy, you've made your ruling, I'll let you enforce it. What can we do to push back against an unlawful Supreme Court and take a stand as a state for state sovereignty, state rights, and tell them, no, you're not going to enforce that upon us?
Thank you.
Great question, and I've been severely disappointed over this past week. You know, whenever the White House was lit up in rainbow colors, I'll never forget it. I was at a wedding that night and received a text from my sister. She's got 2 little children, and she goes, "Will, what do I tell my kids why the White House is lit up in rainbow colors when they're asking mommy and daddy, why is the White House now rainbow?" That sickens me and brings tears to my eyes right now. The federal government has to start adhering to states' rights, and they need to let us, Texas, run Texas. And, you know, prime example is being our border down to our south. They haven't done a thing about it. Now it's costing us as taxpayers over $800 million over the next biennium to protect our borders, when we're already paying taxes to the federal level and they're not protecting our borders. And we have got, Texas is doing a great job right now, but the problem is we shouldn't be put in that situation. And the Supreme Court have been severely disappointed in it. we, as in Texas, other states, we have to protect our state's rights. I know that Cecil is going to roll out something on Monday that may have something to do with that, so it's okay with you pass it on, okay? Those are my feelings.
Since this is likely to be our last question, if you care to expand at all, let me shelf the last 10 seconds of your 2 minutes.
Yeah.
We'll let each of you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's fine. You know, I was sitting at that wedding, that night, and it was a marriage between a man and a woman. It was my nephew getting married, and I received the text at the reception. I just got off the dance floor with my daughter, and you know, received this text message from my sister, and like I said, brought tears to my eyes then, now, and it's just a shame of what is going on. Those are my thoughts.
There are two aspects that I approach this from. One is because I am the pastor of a church, and the other is as a legislator. As the pastor of a church, I operate in a fixed theological perspective. I believe that the Bible is the Word of God in its entirety, and I believe that what it has to say about a man and a woman, and them being together, a man leaving his mother, leaving on his wife, to becoming one flesh. I also know what Romans says about how when people have a penchant towards a particular evil and they refuse to either deal with it or they're unable to deal with it without some type of moral revelation, God will turn them over to the conclusion of their lifestyle, which is taking place right in front of our very eyes. And it explains this particular movement. From a legislative perspective, I look at this from this. You guys, in 2005, said, the majority of Texans said, that we believe marriage between a man and woman is in the Texas Constitution. And when we watch this being violated and run over by our U.S. Constitution, which in the 10th Amendment says, if we don't address it, you get to address it. They bring it in under equality, but they don't bring it under the topic, which is marriage. I have a hard time with that. These guys have a hard time with that. At the end of the day, we sit here and we look at this, our constitutional rights and the overstretching of the president and the individuals on the Supreme Court, which, by the way, have no more power than those in the legislature or in the executive branch. And we have given over the emperorship of our country to a group of judges that are rogue. Doesn't that make you crazy?
Yes.
Yeah.
It starts with you and me, and that we have a connection to the only one who is able to change the hearts of the people of this country. Because if you don't know this, the entire country is moving in that direction. That they would call Bruce Jenner a hero is mind-boggling. Who now is going this transgender deal. I want to encourage you. It starts with us. And please don't think for 1 minute that this one little group and our prayers and our focus can't change this country. We can. God went through in the Old Testament. He said, I'm looking for just one man to stand in the gap. Just one. Cecil stood in the gap for all of us this session. He came out with this bill. He faced so much heat for that. It was unbelievable. He did not budge. It was awesome to watch. It was an example to me as a freshman legislator. It was fabulous. It was painful. Out on the steps of the House, oh my goodness, it was painful. But you know what? When you're doing the right thing and you stand for the right thing, God honors those who honor Him. And this is legislatively right, it is biblically right, it is morally right, and for the future of our country, it can start right here in this group if we will commit ourselves to praying and focusing, because it's going to take a revival in this country. A third great awakening to make it happen. Thank you. My preaching is over.
Wrap it up and preach it at that. But I think some of the things that we need to understand when we look at this question that you've asked is that we have put in place across this nation and across our state attorneys who would have us as individuals to believe, because the Supreme Court has issued an edict, that is the end all of all. When in fact, that is not the case. And our founding fathers, in their far-reaching vision and anticipation of just such a time as this, when we would find a court that was not acting, to use Justice Roberts' words, and I don't, in recent years, haven't had a whole lot of use for Justice Roberts either, but when he says that this court, this ruling finds no premise, no basis in law, and no premise, no foundation in constitutionality, he is saying to us, and goes on to say that, remember, the court has no authority to impose its will on U.S. citizens. But yet we find across our nation, all of the states are now suddenly adopting it as if it were, because the Supreme Court said it, it is so. Well, literally what we lack is leadership to tell us as individuals what it is that we can do. Because there are things we were given as citizens of this great nation that allow us to take control of times like this. And on Monday, I will be releasing or making a big announcement, and a big part of that conversation will have to do with what do we, with all of this energy that's in this room that says that Supreme Court is wrong. It's wrong on marriage, it's wrong on pro-life, it's wrong on Obamacare, it is wrong. What can we do? Do we have to sit and be frustrated? Do we have to sit and be infuriated? Because I'm going to tell you, when I heard it, my wife looked at me and she said, "What's wrong with you?" I said, "Baby, I've got to go somewhere there aren't people." She said, "Why?" I said, "Because I'm fixing to pick a fist fight. And because I've got to get rid of some of this. And I'm not going to do that because it's not the way to handle it." But rest assured, we can't handle it. We must handle it. This generation depends on it. Our kids depend on it. And those generations yet unnamed depend on it. And if we sit idly and do nothing, it will fall on us that we don't hold our nation.
Amen.